Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a profoundly personal and really powerful narrative today. It's about a woman named Teresa Journey, originally from Maputo, Mozambique. We're going to walk through the major events of her life sequentially, a journey that is marked by immense love, completely unimaginable loss, and ultimately incredible spiritual healing. Really, it's a look at how the human spirit, when it's deeply anchored in faith, can weather literally the most devastating storms imaginable. Now, I want you to just take a second to really process this question. How do you survive losing your child and both of your parents by the age of 33? I mean, it's a level of grief that's almost impossible for most of us to wrap our heads around, right? Yet, this is exactly the reality Teresa faced. Throughout this explainer, we aren't just going to look at the tragedies she endured. We're really going to explore how she managed these changes emotionally through her spiritual beliefs.
So, here's the timeline we're going to be following. It maps out the sequential chapters of her life, from her blessed upbringing in Maputo to her marriages, and all the way through the birth and tragic loss of her son and the passing of her parents. Having this chronological view is absolutely crucial to understanding how the strength she built up in her early years actually prepared her for the trials of adulthood.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Part 1. A Blessed Childhood.
To really grasp Teresa's capacity for survival, we have to look at where she started. She calls her upbringing in Maputo a blessed childhood. She was the only girl among 4 siblings, and her home was just full of warmth. Her parents weren't just authority figures, they were actually best friends. Her dad would come home in the late afternoon, whip up fruit salads for the family while her mom cooked dinner, and they shared these meals together every day. And here's a key takeaway. They created a super secure emotional environment. Teresa says she literally never saw her parents argue or disrespect each other in front of the kids. That kind of unity sets a very high baseline for what love is supposed to look like.
Moving into adulthood, we hit Part 2, Marriages and Disillusionment.
So at 23, Teresa gets married. She's pregnant with her first daughter, and initially it's a really peaceful relationship. Her husband was a present dad, waking up with the baby at night, but eventually his work took him to another province, and that distance created a rift. Because Teresa was independent and had so much support from her parents, that physical distance ultimately led to an amicable separation in 2018. There was no bitter falling out here. In fact, to this day, they communicate respectfully to co-parent their daughter. It was just a mature end to a peaceful beginning.
But look at this slide, because this is where things take a drastic turn. On one side, you have the secure, emotionally safe relationship modeled by her parents. On the other, the terrifying reality of her second marriage. Teresa met this second husband during a vulnerable time for him. He had a deep inferiority complex, which quickly morphed into a highly toxic, volatile, and emotionally manipulative dynamic. It completely shattered the peaceful reality she was used to, even involving property destruction and the police.
It's like a textbook cycle of abuse, and she endured it for 5 years. Step 1, verbal and physical aggression. He would demean her, throw her clothes out in the rain. Then step 2, he'd apologize profusely, crying, begging her family for forgiveness. Step 3, he'd make these grand gestures, buying cars, houses, giving her anything material she wanted. And then, step 4, the whole cycle would just start all over again. She endured this for years before they finally went through with their lobolo, which is the traditional marriage ceremony in their culture.
This brings us to Part 3, the deepest tragedy. This next phase tests the absolute limits of human endurance.
Right after that traditional marriage, in late January, Teresa discovers she's pregnant. But instead of joy, her husband reacts with total hostility. The abuse gets so bad that at 7 months pregnant, he physically assaults her. She realizes her life and her baby's life are in real danger, so she leaves and moves back in with her parents. When her son is born in July, her ex's cruelty doesn't stop. He treats the baby with total indifference, initially refusing to even register the birth unless Teresa humiliated herself by begging him.
Despite all of this, Teresa pushes forward. She goes back to work while her mother and a babysitter care for her beautiful, healthy 9-month-old boy. But then, the unthinkable happens. Around 1 p.m., the babysitter takes him for a bath, then feeds him lunch. While eating pumpkin soup, the baby starts to choke. Teresa's mom and a friend desperately try CPR, but he loses consciousness. Later that evening, Teresa comes home from a normal day at work to her worst nightmare, her mother standing in the street holding her lifeless son. They rushed to the hospital, but it was too late.
As if the devastating loss of her child wasn't enough, while she's rushing to the hospital, terrified, she's trying to call her ex-husband. He rejects the calls. When she finally gets a message through about what's happening, he ignores her. He didn't show up at the hospital. He didn't even attend the funeral. He completely abandoned her in the darkest moment of her life. She was left feeling entirely dead inside.
So you might be asking, how do you even survive that? This is where we see her incredible emotional management. Amidst crushing depression, Teresa immediately anchored her unimaginable grief in her spiritual beliefs. As she says here, it was God's time. I just pray always that my son is in the glory of God. She accepted that she couldn't understand the why, trusting instead in a higher plan. Now, this faith didn't magically erase her pain. There were days she couldn't get out of bed, but it gave her a framework to process a tragedy that otherwise made zero sense.
Part 4. Recent losses. Honestly, just as she was trying to piece herself back together, the ground gave way beneath her once again. 15. That is the devastatingly short number of days between the passing of her father and the passing of her mother. While grieving her son, her father, who had been battling kidney failure, passed away. And then, literally 15 days later, her mother passed away too. Her mother was her absolute rock, the one who supported her through the abuse and the death of her baby. So, at just 33 years old, her entire foundational support system was completely gone.
Which leads us to Part 5, Faith, Family, and Resilience. Experiencing this level of compound grief would break almost anyone, for sure. But Teresa's story is one of profound resilience. And she's very honest about it. She didn't just passively accept all of this. She wrestled with it spiritually. She allowed herself to feel the anger, to question God, asking, "Why me? What did I do wrong?" But she didn't stay stuck in that anger. She let the Holy Spirit, her church, and her friends comfort her soul. She allowed her community to hold her up when she physically couldn't stand on her own.
And that brings us to her current reality. Today, at 33, she has no time to give up. She's raising her 9-year-old daughter, but with her parents gone, she's also stepped up as the guiding figure for her 2 younger brothers, who are 25 and 19. She's leading a household and pushing forward every single day. And she does this fueled by the love she got in that blessed childhood and the strength she's forged through her faith.
Teresa says her life feels like a roller coaster, but by the grace of God, she believes the pain will pass and her soul will be fully reconciled. So after walking through her chronological journey today, I want to leave you with this to think about. How does faith allow us to rebuild our lives and find reconciliation after experiencing complete devastation? It's a really powerful thought to carry with you. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep learning.